Hi everybody, thanks for those who are staying on for the next few sessions. Welcome to everybody else to the Singapore FinTech Festival and to the regulatory stage. As I mentioned earlier in the session as well, I do see a lot of regulatory colleagues in the audience. So thanks for making the trip down to Singapore. Hope you have some learnings and have a lot of fruitful bilateral engagements. And in that spirit, we have on stage today a range of regulators from around the world, and we are going to be talking about crypto assets and the work that we've been doing in each of our jurisdictions. The connection we have here is we're all obviously members of international organizations that work closely together. Chiefly, we're all members of the IOSCO. And for Thailand and Singapore, of course, we're also members on the ASEAN Capital Markets Forum together. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about where we are at in each of our jurisdictions in terms of regulation, how we've been thinking about regulating cryptocurrencies in each of our jurisdictions. I think just to give a little overview of where we've been, I think maybe about 18 to 24 months ago, the thinking about regulation around cryptocurrency was still quite nascent, and you had jurisdictions really taking things in their own time and in their own manner. To a large extent, that is still true, but I would like to say that I think 18-24 months on, with guidance coming out from FSB and IOSCO, most jurisdictions, I think, have somewhat coalesced in the thinking and our policy direction in how we want to regulate crypto assets. Being generally securities regulators, we think about consumer protection, market integrity, as well as financial stability. I think the journey for us, MAS in Singapore, started in 2017. We had what we called the ICO boom. It called initial coin offerings. At that time, it was very, very new. And I think most jurisdictions had to struggle, right, to figure out what this was. I mean, for MAS, what we did was that we said, okay, let's look at this. And at the end, we basically said that if you are making an offering and if it's basically a security, no matter whether it's a digital format or not, our security rules will apply. So we took that look-through tech-neutral approach very early on in 2017. And we have carried on with that approach in most of our regulations in crypto assets. So to just give an update, we consulted, we responded for Singapore domestic legislation. We have started implementation. The first set has been implemented in October, mainly protection of assets, segregation, and also consumer safeguards that have come out, and everything should have rolled out by the middle of next year. So I think the Singapore journey has been a bit of a compressed timeline one, as other jurisdictions have also experienced. And I wanted to actually kind of like start off by calling upon some of my colleagues here to share what's happening in their jurisdictions. So we have here Mr. Charles Moussy, Head of Innovation and Digital Finance from AMF France. We have Dr. Nopnuanparn Pavasant, she's Assistant Secretary General of the Thailand SEC, and Dr. Rhys Bollen, Senior Executive Leader of Digital Assets of the Markets Group from the Australian Securities and Investments Commission. So maybe I'll turn to a regional neighbor first. Maybe you could share a little bit about Thailand's journey. I know you're one of the first in the region actually to start thinking about digital assets. You've rolled out some rules. I know you've been doing some more recent reviews. Maybe to share with the audience today about where Thailand is at and your thinking on this.
Okay, actually for SEC Thailand, we support the use of technology in capital market, and we amend our security law in 2019 to pave way for fintech and innovation. And for digital asset and crypto asset, we have specific law on that. And as you mentioned that during 2016 or 2017, there are a lot of cryptocurrency and ICO projects launched to the public. And for investor protection, for market integrity, as well as the anti-money laundering reason, the specific law on digital assets has been enacted in 2018. And according to this law, there are three types of digital assets, including the investment token. For this investment token, many countries will consider it as security. And there are also the utility token and cryptocurrency, which collectively known as the crypto asset. And the offering of token for fundraising purpose, right? The offering of investment token or some kind of utility token must get approval by the SEC. And the issuer have to publish the white paper to the public. And until now, there are three cases, success case for the investment token offering. Two are real estate tokenization, is the tokenization of condominium and office building in Thailand. And another one success project is the token offering to invest in the movie project. And now there are around 10 projects in the pipeline. And for digital asset service provider, there are 6 licenses for that, including the exchange, broker, dealer, investment advisor, fund manager, and custodian wallet provider. The licensed person must obtain the license from the Minister of Finance and have to comply with the rules like the capital adequacy rules, the anti-money laundering law, the asset safekeeping rule, as well as the business conduct prescribed by the SEC. Now we have 22 licensed providers under digital asset law. And if comparing with the IOSCO recommendation that they already published the recommendation on the crypto asset, our legal framework and regulation most are adhere to that principle, including the governance and disclosure principle, the conflict of interest management, the safeguard of client assets, the mitigation of abusive behavior, as well as the investor protection principle.
Yeah, it really sounds that Thailand has thought about the whole value chain. You've got your licensing and you've thought about your brokers, intermediaries. Right. You've also actually put that in. And you've talked a little bit about tokenization as well.
Right.
I think that's like a bit of the next bound. And in the earlier panel and in our IOSCO work, we do also look at tokenization.
Right.
But I mean, even just hearing from Thailand, it's quite clear that how everybody thinks about what a cryptocurrency is quite different. Like for us, it's a payment token in the first instance, but if there's a cryptocurrency that's going to exhibit characteristics, right, that are very similar to that of a security or a bond or debenture, for us, we say that's what you are going to be regulated as. You have to come in for licensing and legislation. But I think Thailand, from what I know and what you've shared, you've actually have created these classes. So it's very clear as well to the industry, right, that they have to come in, they have to license, and then they have to take on those responsibilities.
Right.
So that's very different. We have, of course, other jurisdictions that we know of that have said, you are securities, and therefore the securities legislation will apply. And I guess for others where you kind of like have a kind of a classification system as well. So talking about classifications, I'll turn to Charles because I think that's a little bit the way Europe is kind of like looking at it as well. And I mean, for France, you did start off actually with your own act. I mean, you were one of the first movers earlier on, I think in 2019. It's called the PACTE Act or PACTE Act. Yep. So I think you have that. And then of course, things have moved on and there's MiCA now. That's the European laws. Perhaps you want to share with us a little bit of, your journey in France with your own legislation and how you're now doing this transition?
Yeah, thank you, Abigail, and pleasure to be here on such a vibrant event. Actually, our journey began quite early because it began in 2015, and where we made supporting innovation a strategic priority for the IMF. And the first thing we did was to meet with stakeholders, because when we are facing such a disruption technology, we have to understand the technology and build an internal expertise. And at that time, you mentioned it in the introduction, we had heard a lot about ICOs. ICOs were booming, and we have to assess these are real opportunities and how the risk, and to combine these to go forward into a regulation. And so that's what we did, and we collaborate, of course, with the French Treasury, and we build a tailor-made regulatory framework in French, which is called the PAC law. And the idea of the PAC law is first not to ban crypto and not also to push crypto asset service provider outside France. And this PAC law basically is made of two parts. There is the first part, which is kind of the ground base, the basic mandatory requirement, which is on EML CFT, and we'll also check the honorability and competence of the shareholders, which is called the registration. So every crypto asset service providers who are providing services in France or who wants to target the French public has to be registered with the AMF. And there is a second step, which is kind of a label of quality. We call that an optional licensing. And for service providers who want to grant this license, then they have to comply with much stricter rules in terms of internal processes, in terms of prudential criteria, etc. So we have right now this two-step regulatory framework. And we are in a way to organizing the transition from this two-step framework to the future MiCA regulation, which will come into force at the end of this year.
Well, I'm sure all the regulations are actually quite similar. I think, as Nopnuan has referred to the IOSCO recommendations, I mean, the MiCA regulations are also quite similar. I'm sure most regulators have, in a way, all heading in the same direction. So in terms of the difference between, the domestic laws that you had and MiCA, do you see there being a gap, or actually it's quite aligned in quite a broad principles as well? I mean, at the end of the day, we're all looking at, consumer protection, segregation of assets.
Well, for France, there is a huge gap between, as the regulatory framework is now in France, you have this basic mandatory registration, which is only on EML mostly, and fit and proper of the shareholders. And tomorrow with MiCA, you will have a full license applicable to all service providers in France. So with MiCA, you will have much more rules about consumer protection. You must implement, safeguards of funds and provide clear, accessible information. Also on the operational requirements, that you don't have that in the simple CASP registration in France with governance rule, risk management, etc. And also a whole new part of market abuse regulation, which will not exist in a French framework. So the idea, of course, is to organize a transition from this kind of AML strictly rules to a full package licensing.
I think that resonates a lot with me, because it's exactly how I think Singapore and the MAS has started, right? So when we first put out the Payment Services Act, where we regulate what we call digital payment tokens, which are cryptocurrencies, we also started off really focusing just on AML risks and cyber risks, and that was put in place in 2019. So very similar journey, and that was kind of like the key focus, right? But I think in 2020, we then all saw the boom in cryptocurrencies, and prices of cryptocurrencies were just going through the roof. And that was the time, I think, then we realized, wow, these retail investors were really piling in their money. And we were, of course, concerned. And then after that, there was the crypto bust, FTX and the lot. And you could see a lot of significant consumer harm. And I think that was the time then when MiCA, and even for ourselves, we decided that it couldn't just be AML and tech risks. We have to think about consumer safeguards, business conduct rules, conflicts of interest, even things like retail distribution safeguards, right? So for example, just to share a little bit, the ones that we recently just finalized the guidelines on are the distribution safeguards. So we've put in restrictions on incentives. We've put in restrictions on whether you can credit or leverage when you want to deal with cryptocurrency, which I think quite a lot of other jurisdictions have as well. So I know in Australia, this is something that Rhys has been working on for some time. I mean, you've had some policy thinking, some discussions, some consultations, but I understand it's also an exciting time for Australia in terms of things that are moving on. Maybe you want to kind of like give us a little look back on the Australian journey, and if you're able, a little peek into what's coming up soon.
Sure, happy to. So, and Thanks for having us as part of today. We have a similar overall journey. Virtual assets have some specific rules in the anti-money laundering, counter-terrorist financing area, but in terms of the consumer protection and market integrity regime, it's the same regime that applies to all financial products and services. So similar to how you described the way the Singaporean regime applied, so we have quite broad definitions of financial product. Any facility through which people make payments, any facility through which people make investments or manage risk is a financial product, and we've said since the ICO boom that includes crypto products. The technology that you're using, the fact that you're using distributed ledger, the fact that you're using blockchain doesn't resolve whether or not you're caught. It's the substance of the product. So our first guidance in the crypto space was in 2017 during the ICO boom. It was updated a few years later when crypto ETFs became of interest, and we had those a little bit earlier in Australia than some places. As you say, we have some government proposals, so our equivalent of a VASP or CASP regime is currently an active government proposal, so they have specific proposals. It's going to be called a digital asset facility, and essentially a custody and trading platform, so it's the service provider level. A government proposal has been consulted on, and they're just in the legislative drafting stage, and that'll come forward when the government has the opportunity, and it'll go through the usual parliamentary process. So that will add another layer to our existing regime. So we've got the financial products already called at the product level. This will include the service providers at the service provider level, and that will give a more wholesome and holistic coverage for digital asset products, those that are clearly a financial product today and some others as well. So we'll have broader coverage, and that'll allow us to respond to the full range of issues that are out there. And we're due to give some updated guidance shortly. So next month ASIC will be publishing some updated guidance, and that will give people a clear sense of where we see the current law's application, which products we think are caught and not caught today, and then the legislative regime will be updated when the government has the opportunity.
I think one thing I've learned in my own regulatory journey is that engagement with the industry is really important, and I think they've always said that clarity in the different regimes is something that they always looked for. So I think, we're talking about, are we there yet? I think in terms of clarity, I think given the IOSCO recommendations, MiCA, and most jurisdictions coming out with rules, I think I would score the clarity as quite a high on the scale. What do you guys think? In terms of clarity of our global rules in this space.
I think in terms of the key concepts, market integrity, managing conflicts of interest, transparency and disclosure, I think we have a fair bit of clarity and consistency. We were talking at another session earlier in the week. I think the regulatory perimeter is probably the challenging part, and we all have slightly different perimeters. That's the area where a bit more clarity is still to come.
Yeah. Nopnuan, in Thailand, what have you been hearing from your industry about clarity? What's the feedback you've gotten, and how have you navigated, this new space with the industry as well?
Right, yes, because we have the specific law on that, right? And then, however, it's developed so fast for this industry. As first, it's just like that, our regulation focusing on the ICO and the disclosure. But when the real use case occur in Thailand is the tokenization of assets. That's the first case, it's just like the tokenization of the real estate. And then recently we talk closely with the industry, and we also open for consultation that there may be some project to consult. And recently we introduced the green token regulation, that the tokenization of the green project or the sustainability project, that it can be in the form of investment token, that the token holder receive revenue sharing from the green project with its success, or can be in the form of utility token, that is just like the token represent the green product itself, like the tokenization of the carbon credit. And we also introduce some regulation on the real world asset tokenization, that some assets such as movies or song can be offered through the shelf filing scheme. That is just like the issuer can offer the multiple issue of token within a single approval. This leads to cost effectiveness of the issuer and in line with the characteristic of the asset. And for the traditional player, now they are increased interested in the tokenization, and as you said that for tokenization of the security or the bond, they are under the security law according to Thailand. And this year we are in the process of amending our security law to accommodate the electronic security. This to ensure the legal effect and the enforceability of the security in the electronic form, including the offering, the transfer, and use as collateral of the security in electronic form. And for payment token and stablecoin, we work closely with the Bank of Thailand because the Bank of Thailand is the regulator of the money market. And some of traditional players, such as the company in the banking group, they're interested in the tokenization for payment and settlement. And the Bank of Thailand recently introduced the programmable payment sandbox. And for SEC, we have the sandbox for the digital asset service. And you know, some activity under the programmable payment may fall under the digital asset service, such as the custodian wallet provider activities, the broker activity or dealer activity. That's why we cooperate with the Bank of Thailand on this sandbox, and we provide one-stop service of consultation for the participant who interested in this sandbox and the activity for under the programmable payment of the Bank of Thailand and also the digital asset service of the SEC.
Wow, sounds like the SEC has really worked it all out. But it's great to know, even for the areas that are, a little bit pushing out into the future, like the tokenization space, which I think for Thailand, you've really thought about it in terms of the technology. That's how I realized you've thought about it in terms of the DLT and the tokens, and you've kind of like thought about your policy and your regulations around that space. So it spans across a slightly different type of value chain from maybe other jurisdictions. So as I understand it, you look at it from types of products that use this technology, and then you're kind of like regulating it that way. And I think you've moved quite fast on that. So it's quite interesting to see how have you designed the rules and the regulations.
Yeah, but actually, although we have the specific law on digital asset, but the regulations are based on the same
very similar
outcome.
That's right. And how about for you, Charles?
Well, in terms of clarity, Mika will definitely go a step further, because right now in Europe, in the European Union, you have 27 countries, 27 different regimes. So for a CASP, for a crypto asset service provider, it's kind of a nightmare, because you cannot be established somewhere and couldn't passport your activities. But with Mika, there will be a unique single framework who apply to all EU countries. This will definitely bring more clarity for the players, more security for the consumer. And you could, with Mika, for example, be established in France and offering services in Germany or in Spain, because it will be the same license. And the other of importance topic will be the convergence of the supervisory actions. Because when you are established somewhere in France, for example, you will have the same supervisory rules who apply to you after. And so that's why we're working, all EU countries are working also with the European Autorité, which is called the ESMA, European Security and Market Authority, to harmonize all the rules who will apply to the crypto space in Europe.
I think Mika has been held out as the framework with the most clarity. And I think, in true European style, it does come out with a lot of detail. I must confess that I always eagerly await, for the stuff coming out from the EU, because it does have a lot of well thought through policies. I mean, like you said, it really unites the region, and this passporting idea is really quite unique. I don't think that happens often in other regions. But what I think has been really helpful is to see how the forward thinking of supervisory issues, which I suppose is the next bound we as regulators have to think about. And that's probably something we'll have another panel on next year. So do come back, watch this space. We'll probably be talking about market integrity, market misconduct, supervision, Maybe by then we'll have some supervisory colleges in play as well. So that's kind of like the next bound. That's kind of like what I'm thinking in like the next 2-3 years. What about you guys? Where do you think it's going to be headed?
Agree with all of that. Hopefully we'll be no longer debating what's a security and what's not, but talking about how to run a good, well-regulated business, how to manage conflicts properly, how to deal with market abuse issues, what is the best practice in terms of disclosure, what's best practice in terms of dispute resolution and error correction and things like that. That'd be my picture in a few years' time.
I like that one.
Yeah, and I think for the digital asset and crypto asset is developed so fast. That's why we have to monitor the market, the transaction, as well as the international standard. And we have to work closely with the industry. And as it's borderless, that everyone knows that it may be risk of regulatory arbitrage. And now we have the IOSCO recommendation. Harmonization of the standard is very important. And cooperation among regulators is very important.
Yeah, I think that's right. That's some conversations we'd have as well, right? Trying to reduce the regulatory arbitrage and really having the international cooperation. I mean, now it's for policy. Moving forward, I think it's for enforcement and supervision as well. Charles, what about you?
Well, I see two points for me in the future of crypto. First, we talk about it, but it's a regulatory maturity. I think in Europe it will be definitely a bigger transparency, bigger clarity of the regulatory framework, and we're also working with the IOSCO, FinTech Task Force you mentioned before, to bring all regulators on the same table and to discuss. And the second point we see also in France is the bridge between the crypto space and the traditional financial players. I think we see more and more traditional financial players are interested in crypto, and on the other hand you have crypto ecosystem which is more and more regulate like the traditional financial players, and so you have bridges which can be definitely built between the two. It will be also bring more clarity to the consumer, to the investment services in general, and more maybe adoption of crypto assets for more people.
Thanks Charles. I think I'm going to be brave here and try and answer the question that's on the title, are we there yet? I think from the conversations we've had the past few days in various meetings and the conversation we've had here on stage, I think I would dare say we are there. I mean, we've heard all the journeys. It's basically, first we had a lot of research, and then we had a lot of roundtables and industry engagements, and now we basically have our regulations. So I would say I think we're there. If you agree, please, join me in thanking the panelists today.